Secretary LaRose, shouldn't you be in Ohio doing your job? Is fundraising in D.C. more important than being there for State Issue 1?
So he's,
Any comment at all, sir?
That was Ohio Dems questioning, confronting, and challenging Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, our chief elections officer, while he was in Washington, D.C. It was mentioned in the opening clip, but we'll get to State Issue 1 a little later. Now, Frank LaRose is running for U.S. Senate, and not that it's the point of this video, but I can't stand that man. He went from boasting about how safe and secure elections are in Ohio, even saying, quote, President Trump and Vice President Biden have both questioned the integrity of our elections recently without citing evidence, and they both need to stop it, to changing Ohio's voting laws so that certain ways people identify themselves are no longer acceptable, despite the fact that election fraud here is statistically insignificant. Meanwhile, Frank is supporting a man who has claimed that the presidential election was stolen from him without evidence, Donald Trump. See, Trump won Ohio in 2016 and 2020. We know that if he hadn't, he would claim that what happened in Ohio was illegitimate. However, just like U.S. Senator J.D. Vance before him, Frank LaRose went from opposing the Donald to needing 45's endorsement. Then he got it and will do whatever it takes to keep it. So when Trump was recently indicted, again, Frank LaRose said, no one is above the law. But with that said, you're starting to see why people respond to Frank LaRose the way they do.
What we're talking about is preventing any series of things from coming to Ohio that have been talked about. It's not just this radical abortion amendment that we're looking at in November, but it's also,
we'll get there.
Please, civil debate that we're having here. In the work that I do as Secretary of State, I wear the referee's jersey. I'm completely unbiased in how we call those balls and shot. This is how we do the work. Listen, I've taken a number of oaths throughout my life, including one to preserve and protect the Constitution, and been willing to risk my life to do so.
The quote, radical abortion amendment that Frank LaRose is referring to is Issue 1 here in Ohio. Basically, Ohio's current constitutional amendment process requires a simple majority, 50% plus one vote. If Issue 1 passes, 60% of voters will be required to pass a constitutional amendment. The rest of this graphic shows how to add, for example, abortion or legalize marijuana to the November ballot now, which is what Ohioans for Reproductive Rights did, and the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana, like alcohol, is doing, respectively. Both groups have delivered more than enough petitions, but that's not how it would work after August 8th if the Frank LaRoses of the world get their way. Despite earlier vocal opposition to August elections, Ohio GOP Secretary of State Frank LaRose went on to defend possible special elections for voters to decide proposals that would make it harder to amend the Ohio Constitution. Furthermore, quote, during a news conference, LaRose said an August election for a statewide issue wouldn't be unusual. The last time Ohio voters considered a proposed amendment in August was 1926, according to the Secretary of State's office. Here he is claiming that Issue 1 is about protecting our Constitution. I never said it was exclusively about abortion, but in May he said, this is 100% about keeping a radical pro-abortion amendment out of our Constitution. There have been reports that thousands of polling places have changed, and poll workers were sent an email telling them that the special election was the week earlier. Oh, and Frank LaRose was accused of running an illegal election campaign in order to become U.S. Senator out of Ohio. Also, when the Cleveland Jewish News published an outdated absentee ballot form in June, the law that requires one specific form had just gone into effect in April, and then sent it in, this caused dozens of their readers to have their requests for mail-in ballots rejected by the Board of Elections. A week later, according to News 5 Cleveland, supporters of Issue 1 made the same mistake, but they got a different result. Within hours of the Vote Yes team admitting the error, LaRose sent a message to boards of elections that outdated ballot requests can be accepted now. I'm not saying that Frank LaRose is directly the reason why these things happened, but the Ohio GOP knows this is a losing game for them, so they tried to cheat. Frank LaRose knows don't let radical left California, Ohio, is losing. He knows that saying Issue 1 is to stop out-of-state money from buying Ohio's Constitution won't work. I mean, the campaign for Issue 1 is being funded by an Illinois Republican mega donor. LaRose also knows that calling Ohioans who vote no on Issue 1 communists and socialists won't work. Comrades, Ohio Republicans tried to sneak in an August election, despite banning them a few months prior, to take place on issue 1, which will cost the state millions, seeing how we just had primaries like 10 months ago. Ohio, do you want the majority to rule? Do you want your vote to count? Do you want petitions to mean something? I mean, Frank LaRose will say he wants those things too. But Michael Shore and David Schuster are coming after you. What you gonna do when they ask a simple question? Don't be like this man. Watch that video in order to prepare yourself. Or you could be like me and tell them, my architect knows Japanese.